I am not encouraging or advising anyone to modify their firearms. This is not a tutorial. This is for entertainment purposes only. I have been porting my own pistols lately. This Springfield Hellcat is one of my concealed carry guns and the third pistol I've ported. I have posted videos about my two prior porting jobs on a CZ P10F and a CZ P01. I also posted a video about blackening stainless steel, which is how I touched up the finish on this stainless slide. Links to those videos will be in the description if you're interested. These little micro 9s are awesome. They pack a lot of capacity and decent shootability into a small, light, and easily concealable package. Downside is they're a bit snappy due to their size and weight, especially with hotter defense-oriented ammo. A ported barrel can really help calm this down and make them faster, more accurate, and more pleasant to shoot. I chose to do a chunk port on this pistol.
First you gotta do the truffle shuffle. Come on! Do it!
Since this is the first chunk port I have done, I will give a little bit more detail on why I chose the chunk port and considerations of size, location, and the design as it pertains to performance and the ease of machining. Then I will show some shooting footage before and after the porting, quantify the reduction in muzzle flip, and give my qualitative observations of the change in recoil feel. I will also address something that comes up a lot with ported pistols, and that is shooting from retention. As always, timestamps will be provided in the description so you can skip around as you please. I hope you enjoy the video. On this Hellcat, I chose to go with the chunk port because on such a short barrel that will allow me to push it further forward than a line of 3 holes. You want the ports to be as far forward as possible to push the muzzle down around the pivot point of the pistol in your hand. There's also just really not a lot of real estate up here for a line of 3 holes. I will be sizing the chunk port cross-sectional area to match the total cross-sectional area of 3 5/32 diameter holes. In my video about porting this CZ-P01, I give a little bit more insight as to why I reduce total port cross-sectional area for shorter barrels, so check out that video if you're interested. I wanted to discuss my thoughts on port location and why I will be putting it where I am. It wasn't an arbitrary decision. I needed to consider pushing it as far forward as possible while not compromising the barrel lockup area. I also needed to figure out if I was going to move the front sight dovetail or not. First, let's look at the barrel lockup area. You can see the barrel is supported on the top and the bottom by these wear marks. The barrel lockup fit will affect accuracy of the pistol, so I do not want to disturb it. You can see that the lower contact area is further towards the front of the slide than the upper contact area. This is because the front of this contact area needs to be relieved for the extreme tilt angle of this short barrel when the action unlocks. This presents a problem for my port location. There's not enough room in front of this lockup area for a port of the cross-sectional area that I want, and I don't want to put the port where the lockup area is, obviously, because that could negatively affect accuracy. So that means I need to put my port behind this lockup area. I have seen 2 companies porting Hellcats. I won't name names, but their chunk port is at the front of the muzzle, and they machine a new dovetail behind the port. To me, it looks like they have completely machined away the upper barrel lockup contact area. Maybe there is some material left there. Maybe the lockup isn't affected, and how much would that really affect accuracy on a barrel this short at the ranges these pistols are intended for? Maybe the remaining lockup area will wear quicker. I don't know, but I wasn't comfortable removing any of that material. Well, now we have a dovetail and a front sight in the way. I could put the port where the dovetail is and machine a new one back here to retain my backup irons, which is important to me as this is a concealed carry defensive type pistol, or I could put my port behind the dovetail. That's what I chose to do to avoid the hassle of machining a new dovetail. I calculated the difference in port location, and if I machine the dovetail away, I would only be able to push the port 150 thousandths further towards the muzzle. Would that make a difference on this short of a barrel? Maybe, but I think I will still get good performance out of this port if it's slightly further back. I will machine the port opening in the slide so that it is 60 thousandths behind the rear of this dovetail to make sure that I leave enough material so my dovetail doesn't loosen up. Now, if this pistol didn't have an optic on it, I would machine a new dovetail and put the front sight behind the port. The front sight is nice and bright, and it would get fouled up in a few rounds if it were in front of the port getting hit with all that gas and carbon. Later, I will show what I did with my front sight to be able to push this port as close to the muzzle as I could while not moving this dovetail. I have seen some porting jobs where they drag an end mill across the slide and barrel. Does this get the job done? Absolutely, but it's lazy and I think it will significantly reduce performance. I created a 3D model of this so you can see what I'm talking about. Now onto my port design. This is machined from the top down with a 3/16 inch end mill. The width of the slot will be the same as the lands of the rifling, about 347 thousandths on this 9mm bore. Let's think about how gases will be coming out of these ports. We want all our gases going straight up for the maximum reduction in muzzle flip. On this design, the gases will be coming out in multiple directions, kind of like a fan because of the material overhanging the bore. This will be forcing the muzzle, sideways in addition to up and down. And also these gases coming out are going to be interfering with each other, which will likely reduce overall gas flow. On my design, I keep the walls of the port vertical to direct as much gas upwards as possible while reducing resistance to flow. I think this looks better, and it's also easier to calculate and control my cross-sectional area during my machining and design process. My design for the chunk port isn't unique. I've seen a few companies machine them like this, and I believe this is the best way to maximize performance from this style of port. To open up the slide, I used a 1/4 inch ball end mill across the top in multiple passes to reach the depth that I needed. I think it matches the contour of the port in the barrel pretty nicely. After I did some deburring and broke the sharp edges on the slide and the barrel, I refinished the machined area of both to turn it black. The slide is stainless steel, either heat treated 400 series or 17.4 precipitation hardened. I'm not sure which. The barrel must be 4150 because it took cold blue just fine. Since I was retaining the front sight dovetail but wanted my port to be further forward, I decided to install and modify a new front sight. I ordered this front sight from Dawson Precision. It's the same height as the factory one, which is 165 thousandths, and it's for the XD, XDM, XDS dovetail, which is the same as the Hellcat front dovetail. Since these are backup sights, I don't care about losing that bright front dot. I also blacked out the white U-notch in the rear with a Sharpie because without the factory front sight it was kind of pointless. I simply cut the front sight to be flush with the back of the dovetail and then touched up the finish on this sight with cold blue. This allowed me to push my port a little bit further forward than I would have otherwise. For the muzzle flip angle comparison, I am shooting it as I would carry it with an 11 round magazine with the pinky extension and Federal Punch 124 grain jacketed hollow point ammunition. I got the best possible two-handed grip I could on the pistol. Before the barrel porting, I measured a muzzle flip angle of 27 degrees. Same magazine, same ammunition, and the best grip I could get on the gun. After porting, I measured a muzzle flip angle of about 15 degrees. Here is some slow motion footage of me shooting the gun one-handed with my strong hand. The ammo is Winchester 115 grain full metal jacket. Now, after the porting, for comparison with the same Winchester 115 grain full metal jacket ammo. The performance of this porting job was fantastic. I measured roughly 27 degrees before the porting job and about 15 degrees of muzzle flip after. This is almost a 50% reduction in muzzle flip with my self-defense ammo, which is a pretty hot round. Qualitatively, in my hands, the difference in recoil was night and day. It was so much easier to shoot and control and much quicker to get back on target and way less snappy. I will mention that when I first shot it, I checked my zero with my self-defense ammo, which is the ammo I use to zero the red dot. I noticed about a 6-inch point of impact shift low at 15 yards, which is the distance I zero all my pistols from bag support. So the design, machining, refinishing, and performance of this port job were all good. Now let's get to the bad. Shooting from retention, I was injured shooting this pistol from retention to the point I needed to make a trip to the emergency room. I'm totally fine. There will be no permanent damage other than maybe a scar. I will be showing some close-up pictures of the injury. There will be blood. It's nothing too crazy, but if you don't want to see that, then don't watch the rest of this video. Keep in mind, while I sustained this injury, I was still following all the essential rules of firearm safety and wearing safety glasses and hearing protection. Since this is one of my concealed carry pistols, I practice shooting it from retention because I think that's an important thing to practice with a defense-oriented pistol. I hear a lot of talk and speculation about shooting ported pistols from retention. There's no doubt that there's a lot of noise and angry gases coming out of the barrel ports, but that's not all that comes out of these ports, as I found out. And I had a theory that while it would be uncomfortable, louder, more concussive, and maybe I would get peppered with some hot gases or powder, nothing would be bad enough that it would prevent me from practicing shooting from retention. God forbid I get into a self-defense situation where I have to shoot from retention. I figured getting peppered with hot gases and particulate would be the least of my worries if I was trying to avoid getting murdered. Of course, being a student of science, I had to test this. So here's the story of what happened. I was practicing shooting this pistol from retention, and like I thought, it was a bit uncomfortable, but not too bad. So I decided to test an extreme case. You know, I was kind of thinking, like, what if you were in an altercation and the attacker had you, like, pinned down or slumped over? So I shot in a very compressed, hunched over state, and my head was directly over the port, about 2 feet above it, and shot from retention that way. Well, a piece of bullet jacket came out of the port and hit me in the forehead. Blood immediately started dripping out of my forehead, almost streaming out. There was a lot. Scalps bleed like crazy. If that piece had hit me in the eye, there's no doubt it would have blinded me. This is a fringe case, but it was a good reminder to always wear eye protection when shooting, no matter what, which of course I was. I also got peppered all over my face, pretty good with hot powder. I got little burns and cuts everywhere. I don't consider this an accident. I put myself in this situation, and hindsight being 2020, or, you know, honestly, I probably should have seen this coming and knew that this was a logical outcome. You know, the things I do in the name of science, or maybe just being a dumbass. Anyways, it was a bit scary. I grabbed a rag from my shooting box and applied pressure, calmed down a bit and assessed the situation. Do I call 911 or what? There was really no one else at the shooting range around me. I knew the next bay over had a first aid kit. Anyways, I called someone to come pick me up, to take me to the ER. I needed to keep pressure on the wound to control bleeding, so I couldn't drive myself. I got to the ER, and after a long wait, they scrubbed it out, which hurt like hell, and then taped it and glued it up. Now I got a big-ass lump on my forehead and a minor headache, but otherwise I'm fine. I could have taken care of the injury myself, but I didn't know at the time if I needed stitches or not. Now I know not only hot gases and particulate come out of the ports, spalling or pieces of bullet can too. Here are some pieces of jacket I found around the area where this happened afterwards. I think it was this little feller right here, because these others don't match the color of the FMJ I was using. So, you know, that's a pretty good sized chunk. Another thing I should have paid attention to was what the barrel looked like after I had shot it a bit. This is clear evidence of spalling and metal coming out of the port. So I don't know if the jacket started coming off before the port and the port allowed the piece to go upwards out of the barrel. I don't know if the port caused the piece of jacket to separate when the bullet passed it. This was, 115 grain Winchester FMJ, which I consider decent quality factory ammunition. What I do know is that there would have been almost no chance that any piece of bullet could have hit me had there been no port shooting this from retention. Also, clearly a larger chunk port will disrupt the bullet more as it passes, so maybe that makes it more likely that the jacket comes apart. A bigger chunk port will allow larger pieces to come out of it. Had I been shooting this pistol with my arms extended like normal, there also would have been almost no chance of being hit with bullet fragments, If I was in a situation where I was defending my life, obviously this injury would pale in comparison to that if I had to shoot it from retention, but I also can't risk needing to go to the damn hospital every time I practice shooting from retention. I'm not going to say you should or shouldn't port your defensive pistols or concealed carry pistols. I'm simply sharing my experience and adding this one data point to the discussion of shooting ported pistols from retention. However, I will share what I will do and consider moving forward with porting my firearms. I don't think I will be porting any more pistols I consider for defensive use. I will be buying a new barrel for this gun and throwing this one out. Now I guess I'll just have a cool cut in my slide for weight reduction, bro. I think the only pistols that I will be porting are ones that I would consider for range use, and I will only be shooting them with a normal arms extended grip. Now, if someone really wanted ports on their self-defense pistol, I wouldn't choose a chunk port. I would use a V-port configuration, so that would keep things pointed outwards instead of straight up at your noggin. I would also use much smaller holes to limit the disruption to the bullet and also what size of chunks of the bullet can come out of them. So that wraps up this porting job. I'm happy with my design, the machining, the refinishing, the performance of this chunk port. Unfortunately, I cannot justify the risk of injury while practicing shooting from retention, so I will be getting a new non-ported barrel to put back in this gun. I learned a lot and got some great data points regarding pistol porting. It would have been cool if it was a little less painful. Of course, I'm glad the injury wasn't worse. It was pretty minor, all things considered. Sometimes you fail or get hurt and don't learn a damn thing. So I guess I'm glad I at least learned some shit. Anyways, this was a weird one. Let me know what you thought about any or all of it. And as always, thanks so much for watching.